Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. So today I'm going to be talking about something that a lot of pregnant people wonder about when they are nearing their estimated due date or just thinking about their labor day. Sometimes we can have a few false alarms. It's a valid concern because if you are going to the hospital, birth center, or you're at home and you need to call your midwife, you really need to know when labor is really happening. Every symptom and sensation that you have can quickly become, oh my gosh, is that labor? Especially if you deal with false labor, prodromal labor, Braxton Hicks contractions. Let's go over when you are for sure in labor and maybe when you should head to the hospital, the birth center, or call your midwife. Let's talk about a few common things that we see online when we look up if we're in labor or not. This is the mucus plug. It looks like a glob of snot. Mine looked like squished bananas. I don't know about y'all if y'all have given birth before, but mine looked like squished bananas and it's like a big glob in your underwear. But the mucus plug can actually grow back. Losing your mucus plug may not be a good indication of true labor. The mucus plug acts as a protector in the cervical canal and kind of protects your cervix from infections and stuff like that, but you could lose clumps of it before you give birth. Another thing that might be confused with the mucus plug is called the bloody show, and it looks like exactly how it sounds. It's like the mucus plug but has blood in it, or it's brown, so like old blood, and you only typically lose the bloody show once. Unlike the mucus plug that can be lost over time and grown back, but the bloody show can mean that labor is close, near, or happening, or you could be in active labor or transition. Some people don't even notice that they even had a bloody show. Another thing is the clear out. I know that a lot of us pregnant people have heard about the clear out or clean out. This is when your bowels seem to be working overtime and you use the bathroom or even maybe have diarrhea. It's true, you can have clear outs before you give birth. I know that I did. What causes a clear out can be prostaglandin, and it's kind of like whenever you get your period and you have a clear out day either before your period or the very first day of it. And another thing that I see a lot online is contractions. Obviously, if you're having contractions, you're in labor, right? Well, not always, right? Because sometimes those contractions might be false labor, prodromal labor, which is kind of the same thing, and Braxton Hicks contractions. And we've all heard of Braxton Hicks contractions, that they're like practice contractions for the real thing. And prodromal labor seems like it mimics labor, but sometimes isn't always consistent or in a pattern like labor is. And those two things definitely aren't as intense as active labor, and especially not transition. I know online it also says if your water breaks, that can be a good indication that you're in labor. Your water doesn't always break when you're in labor or before you go into labor. In the movies, we always see someone yelling and screaming, ready to be taken to the hospital, saying that they're having the baby. So your water breaking doesn't always mean that you're in labor. Your water can actually break and you may not go into labor yet or be in labor yet. All of those symptoms and signs, labor could definitely be near, or it could just be your body still preparing itself. Regardless, you're gonna give birth soon. If those things happen and your baby isn't there yet, know that there's other things to look out for. And I'm gonna go over 3 phases of labor, so maybe you can pick up on each of those things within the phases of labor. Decide if you're in labor or not. So I'm gonna go over 3 phases of labor and the symptoms that I had. I had a loss of appetite and nausea during early labor. I did this with both of my children, and this can be a sign that labor is near, but again, it's not. It's just like the upset stomach, clean out. It may not always mean that you're in actual labor, but in my case, this was early labor. That doesn't mean that you need to run to the hospital just yet though, because you can be in early labor for 12 to however many hours. It really varies by person. Especially if you give birth fast, there's no way to know how long you might be in early labor. Also in early labor, I had frequent bowel movement and I had sudden exhaustion and flu-like symptoms. I thought I was coming down with something. I had sporadic contractions and I thought it was just my regular prodromal labor. So what I did was I listened to my body during early labor and I stayed in bed. The next day I had a lot of energy and I wanted to clean and be up, and that's when active labor started. Things began to get consistent. My contractions and surges were where from 7 to 11 minutes apart that morning, which isn't quite active labor, but I think that it was getting there. And usually in active labor, people will say that they noticed a shift or a change in their body or within their surges, sensations, or contractions. So that's something to think about. I actually got really hungry during this time and I was nesting. I like to be active in active labor and try to find a good position so I can look back during transition and be like, oh yeah, I liked how that felt. Maybe I can push in that position. It's also really important to remember that pain is progress, and when things pick up, it might become more painful. Pain really encouraged me. It reassured me that it was in fact real labor because changes were happening. You also know that you're in real labor when things are longer, stronger, and closer together. As my active labor ended, my contractions were around 7 to 5 minutes apart and things started to become very intense and I could not really find a comfortable position anymore. A lot of pressure and I had to use the bathroom a lot. I also got my bloody show during this time, and your bloody show is different from a mucus plug because your bloody show is blood tinged and usually will happen when you are in real labor, so maybe during active labor for some people. What to look for in active labor is if your contractions are now about 5 minutes apart. Check on the intensity of your contractions and sensations. How different are they from early labor or from the last time you checked? How long have you been feeling the intensity? When timing your contractions for active labor and hospital admission, it's important to look for this pattern, 5-1-1. This means 5 minutes apart, contractions lasting for a minute long, and for over the last hour. What is the shift or change like? Can you find a comfortable position? Can you talk through your sensations? And remember to take breaks and rest while you're going through this because you're running a marathon. The hardest part is yet to come, but the hardest part, being transition, is the shortest phase of labor, so that's a good thing. So active labor is getting a little bit shorter than early labor, and then there's transition. So you want to try to get to the hospital or your birth setting or call your midwife before transition if you can. Your contractions feel noticeably different and maybe they've been that way for a little while. So transition is just before pushing. Now in transition, your contractions and sensations will begin to overlap and you'll feel like there's absolutely no breaks in between them. I also refer to this as the I can't phase because we hear a lot of birthing people say I can't do this anymore, but they're so close. This is the finish line basically. Like you can see the finish line from transition. So keep that in mind. If you're saying I can't do this, tell your support person that you're probably in transition, and if you're on the way to the hospital, please drive safe, be safe, but let them know it might be close to push-up. During transition, you can feel lots of pressure. Other sensations might include an upset stomach, nausea, vomiting, maybe even burping and indigestion. You can sweat, be a little bit cold and shaky. In transition, it's good to find that comfortable position that maybe you liked in active labor. Try it out, see if it helps, because I know how hard it is to get comfortable in transition, but you can do it. And if you know what position your baby is in, maybe there's a position that you can get in to help aid your baby in getting down and out. Just remember to think about how you'd like to push during transition if you can. I know that things are really intense during transition, so remind your support people what that might look like. Some may not recognize the different stages of labor because, like my friend's labor, it can happen fast, and I've heard of people even waking up just before pushing out their baby. So like waking up in the middle of the night and being like, oh crap, I'm about to push out a baby. So after transition is when you would push and you're fully dilated, and that goes into their stages of labor, which I'm not going to go over today. Not in active labor yet. If you're still in early labor, most hospitals will send you home until you're in active labor, and you can try to labor at home as long as you can. You can go to the hospital if you're in transition. That's just fine. I mean, if you can't help it, you can't help it. And you also don't have to go by your cervix throughout labor. You don't have to have cervical checks or exams. You can go by your intensity and think back to what these different phases are like. But these are just all signs of labor. When you think of labor, or is it time, just think of longer, stronger, closer together, timing your sensations and surges, keeping track of when they occur, go by intensity and how long you may have noticed a difference in all of these changes. And also be mindful of transition, just in case you enter transition on the way there or you already have. That way your partner knows, your support team knows, your provider knows. So have any of you in the comments ever had a fast labor where you didn't make it to the hospital? Maybe you made it to the hospital, you were literally pushing out a baby when you got there. Thank you for watching, subscribe if you'd like, and I'll see you next time.